Hi guys, this is Mr. Tan, and today we're doing another lesson in tourism and hospitality, and we are specifically focusing on sustainability. So the unit code is 203THEL, and we're looking at questions 4, 5 and 6. So as always, we're going to go through different stages, looking at the introduction, focusing on the questions, trying to identify the key words and to break the questions down so that we understand it, because if you don't understand the questions, then you really can't answer the question. We're going to look at, again, the definitions and what sustainability is, even though we've covered this before, and the importance of sustainability within the tourism and hospitality industry specifically. We're going to look at the role of ethics and corporate social responsibility and how that links into tourism and hospitality. And we're going to look at the marketing of sustainable tourism, and we're going to evaluate this. So let's look at the questions first. The first question is to discuss the importance of sustainable tourism development. So the key word here is to discuss, and discuss means to go into detail in terms of different viewpoints in terms of the importance of sustainable tourism. But obviously we need to understand what we mean by tourism, because part of the tourism and hospitality industry, so tourism development. And we need to also remember what we and know what we mean by sustainable. What is sustainability? And then we need to link sustainability to sustainable tourism and its development. The second question, question 5, says to analyze the role of ethics in developing and promoting sustainable tourism. So again, the key word here is to analyze. Analyze means to, or is how one factor affects another. How does one factor affect another? How does COVID-19 affect the tourism and hospitality industry? Well, it's had a big impact in terms of the social distancing when it's shut the majority of these businesses down, and a lot of businesses will be going out of business and people will be made redundant as a consequence of this. How one factor affects another. And then we're talking about ethics in developing and promoting sustainable tourism. So by now we would have understood what we mean by sustainable tourism, and then we're talking about promoting sustainable tourism. So that's the part of the marketing side of it. And we have to then say, well, what do we mean by ethics? What are the role of ethics in developing and promoting sustainable tourism? And what is ethics? What are the definitions of ethics? And how does it affect the promotion of sustainable tourism? And then the third question says to evaluate the marketing of sustainable tourism destinations. So evaluate is the key word here. Evaluate in the English dictionary means to weigh up. To weigh up means to look for the pros and cons, the advantages and disadvantages. So evaluate the marketing of sustainable tourism destinations. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of marketing sustainable tourism destinations, which we will look at. We'll be looking at the complete marketing process from A to Z, and seeing what are the pros and cons of this. And then we're kind of bringing in ethics and corporate social responsibility into the promotion of this. When we're talking about sustainability, we are thinking about predominantly 3 areas. We're talking about a healthy environment, we're talking about a vibrant economy, and we're talking about an equitable society. Now, these PowerPoint slides are interactive, so if you download the Zapworks app on your mobile, so if you go to zapworks.com and you upload it to your mobile, and then you open up the Zapworks, and then you'll see this barcode here. If you just put your phone in front of the barcode, it will come up with all more information and videos and information that I would like you to look at. So please interact with these PowerPoint slides. It's quite good fun. So let's first try again and define sustainability. So sustainability defined: able to be maintained at a certain rate or level. So sustainable economic growth, conserving an ecological balance between avoiding depletion of natural resources, our fundamental commitment to sustainable development. Okay, that's one. Defining sustainable tourism. So sustainable tourism development meets the needs of present tourists and host regions whilst protecting and enhancing the opportunity for the future. Okay, it is envisaged as leading, to management of all resources in such a way that economic, social, and aesthetic needs can be fulfilled while maintaining cultural integrity, essential ecological processes and biological diversity, and all, life support systems. So that was down from the Brundtland Commission in 1987, from the meeting in Stockholm. But these definitions, in terms of looking at sustainable tourism, again, it is difficult to actually pin it down exactly what it means. Other definitions have been provided, stating achieving growth in a manner that does not deplete the natural and built environment and preserves the cultural, history, heritage and arts of local community. Edgale 2016. And then you have another one here, tourism that ideally contributes positively to the sustainable social economic development of the destination. So again, you've got different definitions in terms of what we need and what we mean by sustainable tourism, but we kind of need to break it down even more to understand it, because it's still not quite. So sustainability in its connections to the tourism and hospitality industry. Well, this kind of began with the meeting in Stockholm in 1987. And the United Nations were meeting and they were trying to look at how they can improve things. And this came out in the Brundtland report in Agenda 2021, also in another meeting in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro. And in that meeting, it was really highlighted the key word there, sustainability. And sustainability, in terms of the Brundtland report, Agenda 21, was looking at different areas, and the sector of massive tourism caused destinations to become overdeveloped, used up in time. The destination would lose its appeal as a result of the harsh approach to tourism. This approach has dire economic, sociable and environmental consequences for the host communities. So, if you get so many people coming to a place, it could start affecting the environment. It could start affecting the economic place where that tourism is actually, being derived from. So again, both in a positive and a negative way in terms of economically. So, the Brundtland report was kind of like linking in sustainability, but not at this stage bringing in tourism, because tourism in the United Nations in the Rio de Janeiro meeting in 1992 didn't really focus on tourism and hospitality. It really only focused on sustainability, linking to the three different pillars of sustainability. So let's kind of like look at the different sustainability. So before we look at that, UNWTO states that sustainable tourism comprises of two areas: the ability of tourism to continue as an activity in the future, ensuring that the conditions are right for this, and the ability of society and the environment to absorb the benefits from the impacts of tourism in a positive way. So in other words, that that tourism destination is not really being affected to such a degree in such a negative way, which would be harmful for that tourist destination, the environment, the people who are living there, and so on. So let's look at some of the principles of sustainable tourism. So when we're looking at sustainable tourism, we're saying to ourselves, well, we're using the resources sustainably, reducing overconsumption and waste, maintaining diversity, integrating tourism into planning, supporting local economies, involving local economies, consulting stakeholders and the public, training staff, marketing tourism responsibly, and undertaking research. So, um, you know, when we look at the principles of sustainable tourism, it actually involves a lot more elements. So let's look at the three pillars of sustainability, which we link to tourism, which is the social, the environment, and the economic side. Kind of what we've touched on already. Okay, because just mass tourism to any one location will have its impact, and the question is it sustainable? Is it long lasting? If we look at it from an economic perspective, this revolves around a concept of enterprise supporting jobs and delivering income to communities in the long term. Without this, destinations, the communities cannot survive. Increasingly, environmental considerations will impact upon the economy as we move to a greening of the economy. Cooper 2016. So we know that tourism and hospitality, as we all know, these are two different concepts, tourism and hospitality, will have a big impact on an area, an impact in terms of businesses, an impact in terms of employment, an impact in terms of greater wealth for that area as more money is being spent, which has an impact upon more taxes being paid to the government from those businesses making a profit. More taxes are from the employees who are working, and also not a drain on that country's resources, because if those people were unemployed, then they wouldn't be contributing taxes, and they would be taking money away from that country in terms of having to be supported to some degree or another. So economically, it's very, very important. Even if we look today and we see with COVID-19 and we see how governments are trying to kickstart the tourism and hospitality industry, because people have been out of business for 3.5 months in the UK, March, April, May, June, 3.5 months in the UK. So, which has been very tough because people still have to pay their bills and they've still got their fixed costs to pay. It has helped with the furlough and the government paying 80% of people's wages, but that will come to an end at the ending of July. So very, very important. And the more people, as I said, that are unemployed, it's going to have wider impacts on the whole economy, because if more people who are unemployed are going to be draining that money away and not paying taxes, so you'll be getting less taxes into the government coffers, and more money being drained in terms of unemployment benefit or universal credit. From a social perspective, this focuses on sharing benefits fairly and equitably, and respecting the quality of life of communities, of human rights. It will increasingly involve living, within our means. Again, from a social perspective, who are the people that are being employed in this industry? Are they being treated fairly? Are they being paid the minimum wage? And even from a social perspective, what about the communities? There is a community kind of like life cycle whereby the communities like it in the first instance, but as time goes on, and more people come, it can become quite negative, where people can start to get affected by too many people being in their home area, as such, in terms of noise pollution, in terms of pollution, increased carbon into the atmosphere and into the environment. So from a social perspective as well, it can be quite there's a balancing act to have between the two. Then from an environmental perspective, this focuses upon the stewardship of resources and managing, conserving the environment, and will involve the notion of limits of growth. What do you have to put in place? The more people that come to your area could have a negative impact in terms of the environment, a negative impact in terms of perhaps more cars going into your city. More cars means more emissions into the environment. It means more pollution. If you diesel cars, more diesel fumes going into the environment, so it's less healthy. You know, even if we think about the people and going into a specific country area, and dropping a lot of litter, do you have the right things in place to take into consideration the increased amount of people that are coming and are going to be dropping litter, using your facilities, and so on and so forth? Do you have everything that in place to actually support the environment? Because if you don't, then over a period of time, it could not look too good. Ensuring sustainable success. What we're talking about is, sustainable profits will not exist in the long term without a healthy and attractive physical environment. Tranquil, stable, equitable social environment. Educated group of tourists and locals motivated to support measures to protect the local environment and culture. Okay, so we're talking about long-term profits, and so many times we talk about businesses being in it for the long term and not for the short term. And as well as businesses, the tourism and hospitality industry and trade is a business, so it needs to be sustainable for the long term. So when we look at the economic side, everyone can see the economic positives of it. We mustn't just think of the economic side alone. We must also take into consideration the social and the environmental impacts it can have. And also, the world is a big place now, and people can travel all around the world. So if you don't take care of your area, then you may not be a high on a list for visitors wanting to come to your location. So again, that's something to need to take into consideration. Is it sustainable? So that's looking at sustainability and the different pillars of sustainability and linking it to tourism. But we need to discuss the importance of sustainable tourism development. So what is the need, for? Well, over the last 50 years, tourism has become one of the largest economic sectors globally, accounting for some, 10.4% of the world's GDP, and takes into account over 313 million jobs. So we can see that, it's very, very important to every single country. Even if you look today at the countries in terms of COVID-19, and you say to yourselves, well, first, various countries like Spain had a 2-week quarantine period, especially which they instigated this 2-week quarantine period from visitors coming from the UK, because the UK haven't done too well in terms of the rate of spread, in terms of locking down early, in terms of the number of deaths per head of population in comparison to the rest of Europe. And if they had a 2-week quarantine period, then that would mean that UK tourists wouldn't really want to go to Spain or Italy or Germany or France, to those countries, because they'd have to quarantine for 2 weeks. But Spain and other countries have lifted these 2-week quarantine periods, and now there's been a huge surge in the people who want to get away because they've been in quarantine for such a long time. So again, there is a big need for this, the jobs and the GDP of that, all areas doing tourism and hospitality. Emerging economics, including developing countries, stand to see the highest rate of growth. Okay, so again, more people traveling, lower costs of flights, people wanting to get away on different types of holidays. So we're seeing increased growth rates year on year. Again, international tourist arrivals have grown steadily over the many years. In 2018, estimated to stand, 1.3 billion, according to the WTTC 2018. over the last 10 years, the growth has been particularly marked in the emerging economies, where it has averaged 5.6 per annum compared 1.8 for advanced, economies. The UNWTO predicts, that growth trends in world tourism will continue, with total arrivals, reaching 1.8 billion in 2030. So we're talking about growth, and growth, which is not a bad thing in terms of people wanting to see other countries, people wanting to spend their money, people having more disposable income of different segments of the population from developed countries. So that is a good thing, but we need to say, well, what is that going to mean in terms of the impact, in terms of the environment in those areas? Well, what is it going to mean? And what is it going to mean in terms of the social aspect? In terms of, will there be more crime? Will there be more, social upheaval? What would be needed in those areas to sustain this, to make it sustainable before it becomes overrun and then it doesn't really become a great tourism destination to visit? We must also look at the tourism product. The tourism product, is a unique in terms of activities, it encompasses. Few products can compete with the wide variety of activities included under the heading of tourism. So let's look at the tourism product. The tourism product itself must be consumed within that geographical boundary of that destination in which it is being offered. So it's not like a physical product, but that product is actually, sent to you. This product, you have to actually go to that geographical area. In this global age, providers of the products are not confined to the local economy and may be based outside the destination. So it includes things like, accommodation, transport providers, food and beverage, visitor attractions, tour operators, travel agents. So we're talking about, the tourism and hospitality industry. The whole all the stage from leaving your house to catching a taxi to booking the flight if you were going from one country, from the UK to Italy, and then the transfers, and then the interconnections, getting to the airport, and then within the airport, and then the flights, then getting to the airport in Italy, and then getting to your hotel, and then all the services that you use in that country. Tourism product, we can think of it as, in terms of the marketing mix as well. In terms of the product, you have the core product and you have the augmented product. The core product is actually the essence of the offering, holiday, on a tropical island, for example. Or you've got the intangible product, the offering itself, the actual elements of the holiday to the tropical island, like the tickets, accommodation. Got the augmented product, where the supply of the product adds extra features to be competitive, free extra nights, for example. And also, the augmented product is part of the branding. Who you go with and why you actually go with this. Which airline are you flying with? Why are you flying with that airline? The augmented product is also the branding. When we think about the product as well, the production and consumption of tourist products occurs simultaneously. It affects most sectors, both directly and indirectly, of the economy. This simultaneously of production and consumption also creates specific social and environmental impacts. Not only associated with the production of other products and services. Okay, so the tourism product, you're going to be, simultaneously of production and consumption. And it's going to affect that geographical area in terms of socially and the people who live around that area, and it's going to have an environmental impact. Even if you think about the carbon footprint, and you think if we have an increased amount of people traveling around the world globally, what is that carbon footprint going to do to emissions and gases and to the ozone layer? How is that going to affect the environment from a world perspective? When we think about the interrelationships of tourism, we're saying to ourselves, you've got the communities in terms of the destination. You've got companies in that destination, and you've got consumers going to that destination. But also you've got tourism, the environment, and society and culture, and these consumers, and then taking into consideration, the environment in that area, society and culture in that area, and as tourism grows, how much can one area take in terms of tourism and hospitality? And even if we think now in terms of COVID-19, we think about tourism and hospitality at this precise moment in time. Even if we reduce down a 2 meter rule down to 1 meter, are people going to keep their distance? And if not, is that going to, cause another wave or another spike in terms of COVID-19 cases? So even there, we can see from a social, cultural, and environmental perspective, what impact is that going to have? If we look at the beaches in Bournemouth in the UK, and we see over the weekend with the hot weather, people are shoulder to shoulder. If we see, in various cities with Liverpool and supporting their football club having won the league, again, you say to yourselves, everyone all close together, not adhering to the 1 meter or 2 meter distance rule. What impact is that going to have on our health in terms of COVID-19 and society and culture? Again, we can see how this has a direct influence in it. So, how are the tourism and hospitality industry going to react in terms of taking these factors into consideration, in terms of restaurants, in terms of their seating, in terms of seating outside, and so on and so forth? So again, has a direct impact on the increased number of tourists and that destination, and supposedly how that destination actually copes with that increase, especially now with COVID-19. When we think about the UN Millennium Development Goals, they include various goals, including eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, achieve universal primary education, promote gender equality and empower women, reduce child mortality, improve mental health, combat HIV, AIDS, malaria and other diseases, ensure environmental stability, and develop a global partnership for development. So again, the UN Millennium Development Goals, we can see, and they are kind of like linking in as well and having an impact in terms of the social and environmental side, in terms of focusing on areas that we should be thinking about as regards to sustainability with increased visitors to that area. We think about the life cycle of a destination. Again, we've got the life cycle a bit much like the product life cycle, where you have the introduction, growth, maturity, and then decline or extension. But in the same way, you have the tourism product destination life cycle, which is the exploration, the involvement, the development of consolidation and stagnation of that area, and then, like everything, there will eventually be either a rejuvenation, where it's rejuvenated with investment, thinking about sustainability and visitors and numbers and other issues like in the environment, or it will start to decline because the world is a big market now, and consumers don't just want to go to one location. So, from a world stage, consumers will look at everything. They will look at the benefits and weigh up the benefits in terms of different destinations and where they want to go to, and what they're going to get out of it and what they actually want from it. So you can't be complacent now in terms of thinking that your destination is just going to continue to grow forever, because it won't. especially with new and emerging markets coming up, um, in the Asian markets where people want to go to these places. It's cheaper, the food is cheaper, and some people say you can get better value for money in terms of what you're spending. So when we're talking about the the decline or regeneration or rejuvenation of the destination life cycle of an area, we're really talking about the regeneration of destinations. A large proportion of UK seaside resorts have undergone regeneration programs over the past few years. You know, under the strategy for seaside success. You know, isn't just relevant to seaside resorts. City and town centres may require regeneration too, due to the high demand, for urban tourism. Hall 2005, and we've seen this. And if you look at the UK back in the 80s, Brighton it wasn't so developed, but in the 90s and 2000 they started to invest more into Brighton and various coastal areas, and they're really popular now in terms of tourists and targeting specific types of tourists to that area. Again, helping towards the economic side of it as well. Some of the reasons for and against regeneration for includes improved social attitude, greater pride in place, greater employment opportunities, definitely more businesses there, more people being employed, more taxes being paid there. If the local investors come to the area, this will boost the local economy, definitely. you know Chance to reinstate an indigenous species of flora and fauna. Chance to you know instate populate reducing techniques. Okay, some of the reasons for against: too greater investment for too little economic return. Again, you need to balance up what you're getting and what you're putting in and what you're going to be getting out. Can destroy delicate ecosystems that have been formed since the destination has fallen into decline. But again, yes, that is very true, but you could take that into consideration and make sure that you spend money on that area to make sure it doesn't happen. Carbon emitted redevelopment destination and additional pollution from visitors, that's also very true. But on the other hand, you could have park and ride, so you can get people to park outside and let them ride in on buses perhaps. Local people become priced out of their own hometowns as its popularity as a destination grows, and greater chance of leakage as outsider investors come into the area. So with any type of regeneration in terms of any area, you're going to have the pros and cons. Regeneration destinations generally, it's more expensive and restricted, to take on half-finished projects like hotels. When the global economic crisis hit, many hotels that were under construction were unable to be finished. It poses a danger to people, definitely, and wildlife. Distracts from the beauty of a destination and can lead to overdevelopment. So, as we saw in session 12, Malta and Tenerife, two destinations that were badly affected. So please remember to go on to the Zapworks and kind of scan this image so you can interact with these PowerPoint. So we need to understand the whole framework for the tourism and hospitality industry. We need to understand everything that's involved to take into consideration environmental and social as well as the economic side of things. We've got here, you've got the traveller going from their home where they currently reside, and then the transit mode, whatever that transit mode is, by car, by train, by sea, by plane, and then you have the tourist destination region. So you have this whole process here, and then you have the different types of transportation, and you have the intermediaries. And you've got, in terms of market forces being affected in terms of transportation, you've got the new tourists, human resources, sustainable development, ethics and social responsibility. And then on the intermediary side of things, you've got total quality management, information systems, globalization, concentration, strategic alliances, and value chain partnerships. So you've got these things happening within the business. We're talking about TQM, total quality management, value chain, vertically integrating backwards. Why? Because we're trying to get cost efficiencies. We're trying to save in terms of increased sales, lower cost of goods, which gives you a greater higher gross margin. You've got your administration costs in your profit and loss account. If you reduce the costs from your administration costs, then that increases your net profit. If you take your administration charges away from your gross profit, gives you your net profit. So to lower the administration charges. So with total quality management, value chain partnerships, and strategic concentration of strategic alliances, this helps you to reduce your costs, to become more efficient, to become more effective, to be able to compete on a global stage, which is what one needs to do. And then you have all the the kind of like the social, cultural, capital, economic, knowledge and expertise, environmental, nature, indigenous people, domestic and international. Here we're talking about the different stakeholders involved in terms of that geographic region, and others as well. And then you've got on the outside, you've kind of got like pastel to a degree. You've got political, economic, social, technological, legal and environmental factors that are happening on the outside. So when you're looking at the tourism system, you kind of need to understand what's happening all the way through. And you need to understand this so that that tourism destination can understand what's happening, who are the tourists that are coming to their marketplace, and how are they getting there, and what are their needs, so that you can link in. For example, in Italy, you go to Italy, you can buy a transportation pass for 3 days, which will also allow you into 3 different entries into historical sites. So you could buy this 3-day pass, which costs I think €20 or maybe more, and then it will allow you into 3 places like the Colosseum, Caesar's Palace, and so on and so forth. So by understanding all of these and the different stakeholders, you can kind of put packages together to meet the needs of the tourist. And why? In terms of making sure that you are competitive, and also taking into consideration, as I said, the other side of things and the business side of things in terms of how that tourism destination is actually run. So again, understanding all these things is very, very important. We're kind of like discussed the importance of sustainable tourism development, and we're kind of now going to move on to evaluating the marketing of sustainable tourism destinations. So just to recap, when we're talking about sustainability, we are thinking in terms of the 3 different pillars of sustainability, and it being long lasting into the future, as highlighted in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro with the UN, discussing sustainability in the Brundtland report in Agenda 21. But we're looking at the 3 pillars, which is the economic, social and environmental impacts of increased tourists to that destination. And we're now saying to ourselves, how do we market one of these destinations? So evaluate we're looking for the pros and cons of the marketing of sustainable tourism destinations. So now we're looking at the marketing process from start to finish of a tourism destination. Obviously, there are various stages and the strategic planning process. So the first stage obviously is going to be looking at your mission statement. What is the mission, the vision of that destination? Where is it that they want to go? And then the next stage will be conducting analysis or an environmental analysis of the place, of the situation, in context to everyone else. So you'll be doing perhaps a SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. Maybe a PESTEL analysis. PESTEL, the political, economic, social, technological, legal and environmental factors. And then even Porter's 5-force model, in terms of their competitor analysis, to determine how you're going to position yourselves. Then once you've done your internal and external situation analysis, you then move on to your goals and objectives. Analyze the marketplace, and within here you would do your marketing strategy. Your marketing strategy would include your segmentation, targeting and positioning strategies, and then the implementation of the plan in terms of the marketing mix. You could look at the basic marketing mix in terms of the product, price, place and promotion, or you could review the extended marketing mix: the product, price, place, promotion, the people, the process and the physical evidence. So this is kind of like the strategic plan that you would go through the whole 10 yards to plan out how you would promote sustainable tourism, linking in the 3 different pillars of the environment, the social side and the economic side of things. Different methods, including adaptation methods of a destination. So are you going to adapt your current geographical location to make it something that you want your target market to come to? If you think about Dubai, and Dubai in terms of what it was, which was basically just a fishing village, and we think about what it is now in terms of a vibrant city where people want to come to in a hot country with goods, services, beautiful hotels and so on and so forth. So again, are you going for an adaptation method? Adaptation, like if you wanted a ski resort in New England region of USA, do you actually adapt that area to create snow, and increased mid-winter melts and more variable ski seasons? Do you adapt that so that you have kind of like fabricated and synthesized snow to take into consideration that marketplace? So do you go for an adaptation method or a natural method? You have the mitigating methods as well. The mitigating methods in tourists, in terms of how it does affect the air transport, car transport, train, coach, destination, accommodation activities, tour operators and destination managers and planners. So when you're thinking about your product, you're thinking to yourself, exactly who is your target market and what are their needs, and are you going to go for an adaptation method or a natural method, and then what are the mitigating circumstances in terms of how it's going to affect different areas in terms of the carbon footprint and the environmental side of things in terms of one of the pillars of sustainability. So let's now look at a destination analysis. We've kind of like covered this before, but a destination analysis covers the vision, mission, aims and objectives. Who are the principal competitors? Destination competitiveness and market structure. What is the market structure for your area and how competitive is it? The dimensions of destination competitiveness, destination competitive and performance. So, and then a strategy for enhanced the destination's competitiveness and sustainability. So this is a destination analysis, but linking it to also the marketing strategy as we saw before. We're saying to ourselves again, the mission, vision, aims and objectives of the geographic location. Then we're saying a situation analysis. We're combining both models together. We're saying SWOT, PESTEL, and in this model a detailed competitor analysis, detailing who the principal competitors are and what is a destination competitive and the market structure of your current marketplace. What are the different dimensions of destination competitiveness, and what about competitiveness and performance? How do you compare to other countries? What do you need to invest in your geographical area to make yourself more competitive? And then a strategy. So the strategy again would be broken down into segmentation, targeting, and positioning, and then linking into the implementation of the marketing mix. So if we start with the mission, a mission statement describes, what your business does, how it does it, for whom and why. It clarifies your, primary customers, your core business, and the location in which you operate. It should also incorporate your values related, to sustainability. A vision statement, it's a description, of what the organization wants to become. Patterson, 2016. A vision indicates, what an organization, would like to become. It carries aspiration and inspiration. Okay, so you need to say to yourself, well, what is the vision and mission for your geographical location that you're looking for and looking at? What exactly is it? Can you describe it? In terms of the organizational objectives, you need to spell out the goals that have to be achieved in order to realize the mission statement. They set out the detail for how a mission is to be achieved, and typically objectives in the tourism sector might include, a financial return, safety and security, customer satisfaction, employment conditions, and sustainable practices. Definitely sustainable practices now, because you kind of put that in as your objectives so that it's there and you're now thinking about the other pillars of sustainability. In terms of saying to yourself, where are we now? You're saying to yourself, what is the destination? What is the product? What is the product? What are you offering there? Development analysis, competitor analysis, visitor analysis, resident analysis, marketing, positioning, destination, audit, and marketing plan. So we touched upon some of these things. We're going to go into more of this again. But where are we now? So we need to find out who are the people that really, you need to do your research, and you need to say to yourself, well, who are the visitors that are coming to your location? Is it domestic tourists or international tourists? How long are they spending there? How much are they spending on average? Where are they staying? Are they staying in hotels, campsites? Where exactly are they staying? What is the market structure for your area? Again, and has that been increasing? Has that been decreasing? So again, you need to have all this information, and then in addition to that, you need to say to yourself, well, in terms of market information, because it does really start with your customer, the visitor. Then you need to say to yourself, well, what are these people like? Do you have a profile of these people and data that encapsulates that to allow you then to review your product and then to compare your competitors and so on and so forth, which will then lead on to your situation analysis, marketing strategy, and then implementation of the marketing mix. So here are some of the areas that we talked about in terms of a situation analysis. We talked about a macro environmental appraisal combined, so PEST or PESTEL, political, economic, social, technological, legal and environmental, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, strengths and weaknesses being internal to the organization and opportunities and threats being external to your geographical area. That need to be taken into account when planning for tourism in that destination. A market analysis assessment includes the destination's tourism market share and performance of market trends, UNWTO 2007. So, but we're also including in the situation analysis a detailed competitor analysis, because you need to have your competitor analysis to see who you're competing against, and your analysis in terms of performance, how you're performing against these other locations. Very, very important, because that then leads you into determining what your marketing strategy should be if you're targeting the right people, and how you should position yourselves to gain a competitive edge. So when we look about a SWOT, we've said that the SWOT includes strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So if we look at the SWOT of an adventure travel company, some of the strengths might be, for instance, to assess a full range of guides to close to international airport, very close. Permits to operate in 3 national parks, partnership. Do you understand? You're detailing the key. You're not just making a list of as many as you can possibly think of in terms of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, but you're really thinking about possibly the key strengths and the key opportunities. If it was me, I would have the top, anything from 3 to 5 key strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in relation to either your company or your geographical area. And also looking at your competitor response profile in terms of your situation analysis. Competitive response profile. Is the competitor satisfied with its current position? What likely moves or strategy shifts will the competitor make? Where is the competitor vulnerable? What will provoke the greatest and most effective retaliation by the competitor? So again, you need to do your competitor strategy in terms of using Porter's model and saying to yourself, how competitive is the industry and who are you competing against, and doing, as we said, the destination analysis is more in-depth competitor analysis by saying to yourself, well, who are your competitors, and then using secondary and statistical data, looking at the visitors that go to them as opposed to you, and are they the same type of profile of people going to your destination and your competitors, and then how do you compare in terms of performance between the customers going to your competitor as opposed to coming to you? What do your customers think in terms of a comparison in terms of performance between yourselves and your competitor? Okay, again, and looking at it, what drives the competitor? What are your key competitors doing? What are their future goals? In terms of your competitor, what is their current strategy in how their business is currently competing? Again, the capabilities, strengths, weaknesses, and the assumptions held about itself and the industry. Okay, so where are we now? An analysis of to formulate a strategy in light of an assessment of key rivals. Or Michael Porter, who says, created the response profile, a competitor analysis framework. So again, you really do need to go into more detail to assess who your competitors are, who are the people that are visiting your competitors as opposed to yourself. Can you capitalize on anything, and how do you perform? Are you performing well or not, and what do your customers want for the future, and is it sustainable, and what investment are you going to get to invest into that? So these things need to be done, because then that would lead into, again, are you going to continue with the same segmentation and targeting strategy, and if so, will you change your positioning strategy or keep the same positioning strategy? So this needs to be done in order to allow you to do your marketing strategy. We looked at PESTEL, political, economic, social, technological, legal, environmental. Political side in terms of Brexit in the UK. We know that, for instance, Brexit in the UK has had a positive impact in terms of tourism from one perspective, in that the value of the pound had fallen, and because the value of the pound had fallen, the euro was now worth more than it was to the pound. So people coming in from Europe into the UK would get more value for their money. So from that perspective, it was more advantageous for international tourists to come into the UK, getting better value for money from a political perspective. But when you look at these political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors, you can't just talk about these in general terms. You need to relate these specifically to your area. to say what is happening and is this going to be a good thing or bad thing for your area or not. So you've got to specifically talk about specific examples of these from a real to life example rather than a holistic perspective. If we look at again the Porter's 5 force model, we can see Porter's 5 force model in terms of threat of new entrants, threat of substitute products, bargaining power suppliers, bargaining power buyers, and a rivalry among competitors. When we Porter's 5 force model, we've got these 5 elements here. So this is how the 5 elements are normal. If we look at the threat of entrance, time and cost of new entrants, specialist knowledge. We're saying to ourselves, in terms of what your marketplace is offering, if you're offering, skiing a ski resort, who are your competitors? And can someone local to you also offer a ski resort, for instance? What is the threat of new entrants into your marketplace, and how likely is it? And that will depend upon specialist knowledge, economies of scale, cost advantages, and technological production that you may have, and barriers to interest. So if it costs a lot to produce a new ski site, for example, in an area that you are in where you have natural snow, then it may be not a threat in terms of someone coming into that marketplace that you're currently operating, in terms of who you are, the tourists that you are targeting, and what product and service you are offering them. If you think about the bargaining power buyers, we're talking about, how what is the cost advantage in terms of the perception of the cost advantage to that customer coming to your location as opposed to going elsewhere. Because we know that tourists are now visiting all around the world, so there are more international tourists around the world, and that's ever increasing. And if that is the case, it's because people are looking for value for money. People are exploring more, people want to see more, and it's cheaper to go to other places in terms of flights, in terms of hotels, in terms of food, in terms of accommodation, and also in terms of the perceived value for money that you get going from one location to another. And the bargaining power of tourists, both international and domestic, is very huge. They have to say in terms of which area they go to and why. Substitutes, we're talking about substitute performance and the cost of change. um, you know so substitute performance, what would be the substitutes? Well, we know that because of COVID-19, people haven't been able to travel because people have been worried about traveling, so they haven't been wanting to travel. They haven't been sure about the spread of the virus on the planes and the distancing rules, as opposed to 1 or 2 meters, because you're sitting right next to the person next to you on the flight, even though they have a face mask, and you don't know about the cleanliness of the toilets, so you don't know about all these issues. So the threat of substitutes, substitute performance, and the cost of change. Well, people have had no choice really. More beaches in the UK, so people have been going and doing things more domestically rather than going internationally, because they've really had no choice. And also with the added restrictions in terms of the quarantine period when you fly. But some of those quarantine periods now have been restricted, have been removed. Bargaining power suppliers, who are the suppliers? The number of suppliers would depend upon that. Where do you get all your materials and source for your geographical area, and the suppliers that you get for the things that you do? Okay, and so who has the power there in terms of the raw materials that you have coming into your geographical area? If there are more suppliers than buyers, then you have the power to negotiate the more discounted and rates of supply, and you can go to another supplier if that supplier is unwilling to change its price. Okay, But then you need to say to yourself, what is the cost of changing a supplier in terms of the materials and things that you need in your geographical area, in your tourist site. But the number of competitors, quality of differences, other different switching costs, and customer loyalty, because you are now competing on a worldwide stage, in terms of you know do people want to go to your geographical location, and what are the needs, and why are people coming to your location as opposed to another location. Okay, so again, the competition, as we've seen in terms of international tourists traveling all around the world, is becoming increasingly more competitive because people want to see more. The costs are becoming low in terms of traveling. Hotel prices are lower. Food prices in hotels are lower, and people are changing their attitudes in terms of wanting to see more adventurous places. And we've seen that with the emergence of the Asian type markets, where people want to see and explore more of these type places. you know when we look at we're still on like the analysis, the different levels in terms of analyzing your marketplace. Okay, we've kind of looked at the mission, the vision, aims and objectives. We've looked at Pestel and SWOT and Porter's five force model. And we're saying to ourselves, what are the elements to be considered during this situation analysis? You need to take other elements into consideration, including the resources. Do you have the right people and resources? Do you have the financial resources to invest into an area? To develop it, to regenerate it. Do you have that? In terms of the industry structure, relationships, organization, and funding. Market in terms of the growth trends, volume and spend, growth in source countries, areas, segments, seasonality, and relating to supporting industries, public services, financial services, retail, construction, manufacturing, suppliers. So, when you're looking at the environment areas, you're saying to yourselves, what are all the issues that you need to take into consideration into your area to make it to what you want to make it, in order to compete against the competitors who you need to compete against to meet the needs of your target customer. So you do your market analysis, and then after you've done your market analysis, you're then moving on to kind of like the marketing strategy. And the marketing strategy is saying to ourselves, well, there are three different stages to the marketing strategy, which includes the segmentation, and then the targeting, and then the positioning. So if you segment the market, you're saying to yourselves, how are we going to segment the market? Are we going to use geographic segmentation? Well, your geographic area is your geographic where you want people to come to. So that's where you are actually based. But who are the people that are coming? Where are your customers based geographically? Are they coming from, if you're based in the UK, are they coming from France, Germany, Spain, China? Where are your major customers coming from? What about your demographic segmentation? How are you demographically segmenting your marketplace? Are you using it by a sex, male, female, for example? Are you using it by income level, different rates of income? Are you looking at it by family size? What are the variables in a demographic segmentation basis that you are looking for? And then behavioralistics segmentation, what are the behaviors of your customers? Okay, are they, for instance, customers wanting to be a competitive edge on graduate admissions applications? What about the psychographic segmentation? If we're talking about students who are interested in sustainability and environmental issues. So we're saying to ourselves, how are you going to segment your marketplace in terms of geographic, demographic, behavioralistic, and psychographic? So if it's geographic, where are your people, where are the people you're targeting from, what locations, what countries, what regions, what cities, towns and states. Demographic, what are you looking for? Age, gender, occupation, social economic groups. And the behaviouristic side, you're looking for what are the benefits being sought. Loyalty status, ready to buy, early adopters. Psychographic, lifestyle, what is their lifestyle? What is their attitude, education level, class? Because all these are going to affect the different type of product or service that you're offering in your geographical location. When we look at market segmentation and customer demographics, we're saying to ourselves, are you looking at the age, different ages of people, and then you would split up the different ages. Are you looking at the element of family status, or the demographic element of occupation, or the demographic element of gender? Again, you would split these up before you do your targeting. So you're not saying to yourselves now that you're targeting males. You're just saying that we're going to use gender, and then you split the different genders. Or you're going to say we're going to use age, and then you split different ages. You don't do your targeting yet. This is just your segmentation. How are you segmenting your market? Psychographic segmentation, lifestyle, personal behavior values, buying style, how they see themselves. Which elements are you going to use in the psychographic segmentation? If we look at examples of market segments, again, you look at you say to yourselves in terms of a strategic framework. So we're saying to ourselves that examples, if you're looking at segmentation description, and then you've got different categories: the serious adventurer, the weekend receptionist, the incentive group, and then you say to yourselves, age range of traveller. For the serious adventure, maybe 25 to 40, weekend receptionist 30 to 45, incentive group 30 to 40, 55, origin of traveller, okay, gender of traveller, mainly male, mainly female, 60% male, 40% female, reasons for travel. So you are actually splitting up different types of people, and you're saying to yourselves, who are the different types of people that can fit into these market segments? Because then later on you would go on and say to yourself, who are we going to target from these market segments and why? So then we move on to the target market, and the target market strategy is to identify and profile the most appropriate and lucrative market segments, their profiles and preferences, a suitable product portfolio to match the target markets, an assessment of critical success factors and destination capabilities required in support of the positioning strategy and target markets. Well, why is this so important? This is so important because your destination only has so much money to spend in terms of marketing your destination or your tourism and hospitality site. And because you only have a limited amount of resources, you can't target everyone. So you have to target, as it says, the most lucrative market segments, so that they bring in the maximum amount of revenue. Taking also into consideration, you don't want to overpopulate the area, because we're now talking about sustainability, and we're talking about different pillars of sustainability that affect obviously in the environmental side and the social side, as well as the economic side. So we need to take all these things into consideration. So we need to say to ourselves, who exactly do we want to come? Not just anyone and everyone, but we want specific types of people to come, and the reasons why. So here we have the STP process, the segmentation, targeting, and positioning. So remember, you would have done your vision, mission, aims, and objectives. You would have done your situation analysis, including SWOT, PESTEL, Porter's 5-force model, and more detailed competitor analysis in terms of using statistical information to look at who are the people coming to your geographical area, How do you perform? Who are your main competitors? How are you competing against each other? How are they positioned? What is your performance against theirs? And so on and so forth. Then that leads you onto your segmentation. What segmentation variables are you looking at in terms of, demographic, geographic, psychographic, behavioralistic? And then you would break down these different segments. And then once you've broken down the different segments, you would say to yourself, who in those segments are you targeting? Who in those segments are you targeting? And then following that, you move on and you say, what is going to be, our positioning strategy? So your positioning strategy obviously is going to be made in relation to how you fit in to the whole marketplace and your competitors. Why? Because you want to gain yourself a competitive advantage. Okay. So some of the benefits of tourism. We've talked about these before. We've talked about regional development. We're talking about rejuvenation. We're talking about more businesses being employed, which contributes to more taxes to the economy into that area. We're talking about more employment, and we're talking about those people working in that industry paying more taxes. So, but there are debates around these as well in terms of taxes and employment and low skilled, longer hours, low paid people working in those industries. But there are nevertheless still economic benefits to so many of economic benefits, generates rapid injections of expenditure into the local economy. Definitely major job creator with jobs that do not require high levels of training. Tourism can generate twice as many jobs as other economic sectors such as oil production. Rapid improvements in living standards creates demands for goods and services. It maintains a viability of enterprises at the destination. So definitely lots of economic benefits. Economic benefits of tourism, developing world, ability to earn foreign currency, you know, creates infrastructure and facilities to benefit the local economy and society. Um, so we've seen this for many different societies, and the Olympics and World Cup, where areas are then rebuilt and infrastructure and investment put into the area. But there is the counter argument to that by saying, well, what has happened after that to those areas? But nevertheless, it can create infrastructure and facilities to that to benefit the local economy and area. Encourages the development of an entrepreneurial culture. Definitely entrepreneurial culture. Reduces dependence on primary economic sources such as mining, oil, and agriculture. And creates a stimulus for domestic tourism industry. Definitely, yes. If we look at the value of tourism in the UK, we can see that it's increasing in terms of tourism expenditure. It's increasing all the time. So it's already up in over 140 million, almost between 120 million and 140 million between 2008 and 2012. So we can see the amount that is being spent, in terms of tourist expenditure. That's just tourist expenditure in the UK. If we look at, in the UK, direct employment, again, we've got, you know, tourism totals almost 170 thousand people being employed, directly in the employment in the UK, tourism direct employment. So, and we can see that all the different areas, and there will be other areas as well, which will, increase these numbers. So over 170,000 people being employed.